So, chapter 1 deals with teaching students in today's world, and the focus here is on the teacher. The chapter would help us to understand things like the characteristics of an effective teacher, the standards that we use to teach, and understanding the purpose standards serve, reflection as a way to enhance the decisions that you make. In the earlier editions, this chapter is called Teacher as a Decision Maker. It also helps us to identify the environment in which we teach and to understand also that the environment is changing, not because you are changing, but because characteristics of the students and other conditions change. And what that means is that teachers really have to change as the environment changes. So, what are some of the decisions that the teacher has to make them an effective teacher? There are three basic decisions teachers make: planning, implementing, and assessing. You plan what to teach, then you implement it, and then you assess what was taught. So those are three basic decisions that the teacher has to make. Your planning will determine how well you implement, and your implementation will determine what you assess. So those three things go hand in hand. Details will be covered on planning in later chapters. But right now we want to talk about the whole issue when it comes to effectiveness. Teachers have to know what they teach. So the teachers have to have a good grasp of the content. So their professional knowledge has to be in line with what is expected in terms of what has to be delivered. And there are a lot of things that impact on your professional knowledge, and not just knowing what is in the textbook. So if we look at these headings: historical, economic, sociological, philosophical, psychological, have all those understandings of schooling and education. And in our context, I would want to include spiritual. Teachers in our situation, in our schools, must have a spiritual knowledge, a spiritual connection, so that that is transmitted to the students as well. Because in our context, the SDA education, our goal is a little different to what the public schools and their goals are. Teachers must also have pedagogical knowledge. You shouldn't just be familiar with what to teach, but you should also be familiar with how to teach it. So that's where your pedagogical knowledge comes in. How do you improve your professional knowledge? By taking short courses, such as this one, by reading, by joining professional clubs and subscribing to professional journals and so on. All of those things will increase your professional knowledge. Your pedagogical knowledge has to do a lot with theories and concepts and research as it relates to effective teaching, as it relates to teaching today's youth, regardless of the content area that you may have. And then teachers must have what is referred to as pedagogical content knowledge. How do you teach in specific subject areas? So your pedagogical content knowledge will help you to deliver a history lesson the way history should be taught, or it should help you to deliver a science topic the way science should be taught. So the teacher must know how to do map reading if it's a social studies class, and stuff like that. Right? So those are the three key knowledge that the teacher must have: professional knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and pedagogical content knowledge. The teacher must also have skills. So whenever we talk about teacher characteristics, the teacher must have knowledge, skills, and disposition. What are the teacher's skills? How well can you deliver and apply skills as it relates to planning, implementation, and assessing. And of course, this in the context of diversity. So you must have the skills to use the knowledge that you have in all of the areas that we just mentioned. So your skills will help you apply the knowledge, apply it in planning, implementing, and assessing. Those are your skills. Some people have those skills naturally, and that was part of the discussion. Are we born with it, or can we learn to do it? Some people have the skills naturally. Some people can learn and eventually acquire those skills. Another aspect as it relates to teaching and teacher characteristic is your disposition. What is your disposition? What are some things that influence what you believe? We are all Seventh-day Adventists on the space here, so there are some things that will have influenced our beliefs. Are you generally caring? Are you generally fair? Honest? Do you value things like responsibility? And do you underscore things like social justice? Now, that side of teaching is in the affective domain, and it occurs in your mind. Your disposition will therefore be seen in how you behave. So what are some teacher behaviors you would expect to reveal the disposition that teachers have? So students come into the classroom and they expect you to be of a certain knowledge level. They also expect you to be skilled, and they also expect a certain disposition from you. And I think these are the key points of this chapter. Some of the things that I think should stand out in this chapter is the whole idea of reflection. Teacher as a reflective practitioner. Your practice only becomes better when you reflect on what you do. And not just reflecting on what you do, but also reflecting while you are doing what you're doing. So the teacher has to reflect on their practice and also reflect in their practice. So reflection has to take place on many levels. Analyze your behaviors, analyze your own traits in relation to what just happened in the classroom or what is happening in the classroom. Too often teachers are satisfied to do what they were taught to do or how they were taught without considering whether or not teaching is taking place. And if I should maybe make that clearer, we say, that is how I was taught, so that is how I will teach. You know, parenting is like that sometimes. You say, well, I was parent that way, and look at me, I'm not that bad, so I will parent my children that way. Of course, that is a recipe for failure, because times change, and your clients will change, and therefore you need to do things and reflect on what you do. So what are some points of reflection? When we think about teaching, we think about what to teach, because that's your planning stage there. So reflect on, what am I teaching? Reflect on how to teach. And you think about some things that will support student learning. Is the method I'm using beneficial to the student learning, or is it just beneficial to me finishing this point or covering this aspect of the syllabus? So how do we support student learning in what we do? And then at the end, you reflect on what worked. Sadly, we use techniques and methods and approaches that don't work, but we still use them because they're convenient, they are what we're accustomed to, and for other reasons. So reflecting on what worked and what needs to be improved requires a certain level of honesty from the teacher and flexibility to change. And all of those things will guide your teaching as you think about it. The standards that guide you. Now, I know in many areas in the Caribbean, there are no standards for teaching. For teachers in the United States, however, there are in fact standards, and teachers are required to know those standards, and when they plan their lessons, to connect their lessons to the standards Now, we have a curriculum in the CXC syllabus that are not teaching standards, but it just helps us to think about what needs to be covered. I don't think there's any jurisdiction, any territory that has teaching standards. If your territory does have standards for teaching, feel free to share that with us. So, what are some of the characteristics of a reflective teacher? First of all, you must have a disposition towards reflection. And that is why there's so many opportunities to reflect in this class, because it will allow us to think about what we do and be able to do it well. You must have a certain level of curiosity so that questioning is part of what you do. Ask a lot of questions, seek answers, understand things on a deeper level, not just on surface. Teachers also have to take responsibility for their decisions. The decisions that you make in the classroom will make or break the students and will reflect an impact on student learning. And you have to take responsibilities for that. I often ask teachers to reflect on this question. When students succeed, when students pass, let's say the final exam, how much of that do you take responsibility for? Do you say, well, I'm responsible for my students passing? Now, look at that on the inverse. When students fail, how much of that do we take responsibility for? Do we ask ourselves, my students fail because of something I did? And those are some of the ideas that we must reflect on when it comes to taking responsibility for decisions. And we must be purposeful and committed to improving what we do. In all jurisdictions, in all occupations, the practitioners are always open to improvement. The carpenter, if there's a new tool that will help him to do his job well, he gets rid of the old tool and he starts using the new tool. In medical profession, if there's a new procedure, a new way of doing a certain procedure, then doctors stop using the old procedure and go ahead with the new way. Teaching is one of the few professions where we still do it the old way and expect different results. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress. And just maybe some final words on your decision. The classroom is, of course, a very complex place. We know that. We interact in the classrooms all the time. And all of the decisions that we make in this multifaceted space we call the classroom is dependent on the kinds of decisions or the kinds of tools that are available to us. So maybe I should say that reflection is important, not just in the classroom, but it's important as a regular way of life, the way that we do things. We're going to meet students on this level, and it therefore requires us to be ready for when our students come and when we interact with our students. So reflection is, in fact, important. The challenge of English language learners, this is beginning to be a challenge because we're finding more and more non-English speakers in the classrooms that we teach. And with situations throughout the Caribbean and the Spanish-speaking countries, where they're seeking refuge in the English-speaking countries, we find that we're meeting more and more Spanish speakers in our classrooms. So the challenges with English language learners has now become our challenge and ours to consider as well. So again, these are some issues that comes up in this particular chapter. Please continue your reading, and as we progress, of course, we'll refer to these issues as they relate to your success as a teacher.